Okay guys, so in my other video we did a lot of things and I created this route. You saw how I created the route. You saw how I did that in my previous video. So you can see all the route here. We have the login route, we have the sign up route. I also imported, you see the user, you see that was gotten from this user schema here. So in my previous video we also made the user schema. I explained to you and I show you how I achieve this. So in the database currently there is nothing in here, but later on in the video, in this tutorial, before the end of this video, you're gonna see how we're gonna insert the data in here. We're gonna make use of the API. In the API, we're gonna sign up a user, we're gonna register a user, and it will appear inside the database here. So currently there's nothing. And in my previous video, in my part 2, I showed you how to set up your MongoDB database. So you can go back and watch the video if you did not see how we did that. So this is the database. Currently there's nothing here. So if you haven't set up your database, go back and watch the part 2 of my tutorial. So this is the user schema, and you can see here we have the name, the email, the password, and down here we exported it. We exported the schema, which will enable us to use it in other classes, in other JavaScript classes or files, you see. So after exporting it, we now imported it in here. This was done in my previous videos, you see. So in this video, we're going to do a lot. We're going to register the user. I'm going to write the logic to sign up a user. I'm going to write a logic that will enable us to log in a user too. So make sure you're following up. So let's start writing the logic to sign up the user. So to sign up the user, first of all, we're going to declare a constant. The constant we're going to call it user. So this will be that user we imported in here. We're going to make use of that user up there. So we're going to say new user. Remember we imported it, so we're going to say the new user. All right, so now that's it. So now we have the user inside the sign up logic there. So when the sign up route is triggered, we're going to create a new user object. So as you can see the user now, we have different fields. We have the name, we have the email, we have the password. So the user here, remember, is the user we imported up here. It's the same thing. So after you import your user, we can now make use of it here. We can now add the fields that are required now. So the fields that are required in here are the name, we need the email, we need the name, we need the name actually is of type string. So we're gonna go back there and I'm gonna say the name. Currently I'm gonna use default values. You see later on in the video we're gonna be getting these values from the user. So Joseph, I'm gonna use my name Joseph here. I'm gonna use my name Joseph. Then if you come here, we have the email. The email is of type string. I'm gonna say email. I'm also gonna use a default value. So later on in the video, we're gonna get the values from the user. So the email I'm gonna use a joseph@gmail.com. So what else do we need in the user schema? Apart from the name, the email, we also need the password. Okay, so down here we're gonna say the password. I'm gonna say Joseph 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, so we have the email, name, Joseph. Okay, so the remaining two you can decide to include them. We have other fields here, but by default they have their default value to be an empty string. So you see The default values are default array, empty array, and so you can decide to leave them. So if you do not make use of those fields by default, they have their own values, you see. So make this asynchronous here, and then we're going to say the await keyword here. Okay, so when the sign up is triggered, we're going to sign up this user Joseph. So now the user.save, remember to save it. In order to save it in the MongoDB database, you have to use the save. Okay, you have to use the save function. Just call the save function on the user in order to save it in the MongoDB database. I think that ace here should be small letter, not capital. Yeah, small letter. So now this is how we create a new user in MongoDB. Like if you create a user, now this is how we do it. So when we trigger the sign up route, this user is going to be registered Joseph. So now we're using default values, but later on in the video, we're going to be making use of values we get from the user input. So now we are just using default values here. So right now, the next thing to do, we're going to return the registered user to the user. We're going to return a JSON. So that JSON is going to contain the user details. You see, it's going to tell you about the user being registered. So we're going to say return JSON to the user. So we're going to do that. We're going to return a JSON. You know, most API, when you use them, you see that the API returns to you a JSON. So this is how we return a JSON. Yeah, we just say the response res.json. So the JSON we are returning here is going to be the user. You see the res.json. So we are returning a JSON here to the user. So the JSON here is a user object. Okay. So you're gonna see how that JSON looks like in a minute. So this is it. We've created a new user and we return the user as JSON. Okay, so and then if you look at this, we're done with setting up the basic for the sign up, and now we want to work on let's save the work here, and we're saving it. So now I'm going to the new terminal. We're gonna go to the new terminal, and the terminal here we're gonna say npm start. So we're gonna say the npm start. All right, so it's gonna be running. The node is gonna run. So the node is gonna run. I'm gonna see the REST API port connected. I'm gonna see MongoDB have been connected. Okay. So now we want to test this endpoint, which is the sign up endpoint. So we're gonna sign up this user Joseph. We have the default user. We're gonna sign up here. So we're gonna sign up that user, and when we do that, you're gonna see that in the database we're gonna have the user populated in there. You know, right now it's empty. You see, we have nothing here. But when we sign up the user, we're gonna see a user gonna show up in there. So user now is gonna be this. When we go to the URL sign up, we're gonna see it now. So now let's go. So come in here. I'm gonna go to localhost, and the port number. If you go to the VS Code, you see the port number here is 9000. So we're gonna use that 9000 here, and then we're gonna paste the sign up here. So by the time I click on it, you see it returns the name Joseph. This is the user now. You see, it returns to you a JSON. So this is the JSON you're gonna use. If you're actually waiting for a REST API response, you're gonna return a JSON. So you see the user now has been signed up. And then if I go to my MongoDB and I refresh the database, so if I refresh the database, you're gonna see a user now. Okay. So now we have my users. And inside my users here, we have the user Joseph, as you can see. So now we've actually signed up and registered a new user now. So you can see that in the database it's no more empty. So that is how we do it. So now you can see the REST API. This is the name of the database, REST API. So if you go back to my .env file we did in the previous video, you're gonna see we gave the database a REST API as the name. And that is how we got the database name. It was gotten from there. That is why you see the name shows here. And then my users is a table inside the database. This table was gotten from the schema. So when we created the schema in a previous video, we gave it a table name, you see. So this was where we generated that name from, my user. The only difference here is that MongoDB will later on convert all the capital letters to small letters. You understand? So you see all the capital letters here are converted to small letters. So that's why you see the small letters here. Then we have an S. The S is attached here. So that's everything we see in here. Okay. That's Joseph and all of that. So now we have all the user schema here, API controller. Now in the API controller, we're going to register another user. Let's say David. I'm going to say david@gmail.com. Okay, I'm going to have a David12345. That is it. And I'm going to save all of it. I'm going to save it, and then we're going to go to the browser here, and we're going to click on sign up again. We're going to trigger the URL. We're going to trigger this URL. So you see now we have David. Now that's the new user we just signed up. David, no profile picture, there is no cover photo. When we go to the database now, we're going to refresh it. You're going to see we have 2 users now. So let's refresh the database. So I guess the sign up REST API endpoint is working perfectly now. You see, we have 1 user, David, and we have another user here, Joseph. So now we have 2 users in the database. So you see the sign up is working well. So it's working cool, yeah. So you see that we have the sign up working, David, all of that. So now time for the login. We have to log in a user. So we're gonna use the email of the user. So by the time you insert or you put in the user email, we're gonna check if that user exists in the database. If the user exists, then you can log in the user. So let's do this a constant, and this constant is going to be a user. Yes, so we're going to say user. We're going to use a user schema, user.find1. We're going to use find1. So find1 will help us find just a user corresponding to the same email. So the email here, we're going to copy the David email. That's the david@gmail.com. So that is the email of the user we registered previously. So now we can use the email to sign in the user or to log in the user. That is the email here. So now I want to log in this user, and so we're going to say find1 user.find1. I'm going to use await here. Okay. So now I want to log in this user. We're going to say if there is no user, what are you going to do? If there is no user, you're gonna tell the user, okay, you to actually register. That means the user is not registered. So if there's no user, we're gonna say respond.status. We're gonna give a status of 404 or 400. I'm gonna return a JSON. So if there is no user, you're gonna get a JSON telling you there's an error. So we use error. We're going to get a JSON with a message. The JSON is going to tell you user does not exist, sign up the user. You're going to see user does not exist, then sign up user or register user. Okay. So you see, you're going to say find1, and if the user does not exist, we're going to say the user does not exist, register the user, you see. So now this is how we log in the user. First of all, we use the email. We check if there's a user in the database with that email. So if the user exists or does not exist, we're going to say, okay, return a JSON, tell the user does not exist, register the user now. So what if the user exists? So if the user is exists, or if the user is not equal to null, that means if the user exists, if the user exists, what we're gonna do is we're gonna send a response to the user. I'm gonna say respond.json. I'm gonna put the user here. So you see, so if the user actually exists, we're gonna so I just saved my work. We're gonna return a JSON to the user if the user exists, but there's an error showing me here in the console. The error in the console is telling me the await keyword, whatever. Yeah, that's because we forgot to put the async. Remember to always make your function asynchronous when you are using the await keyword here. So okay, I'm gonna save my work again. Okay, so actually it's working now. So I'm gonna trigger this login and we're gonna see the response we get. So let's go, let's change this to login. All right, and we're gonna trigger this right now. So for now we are testing with the browser. Still later on in this video we're gonna use the Postman. So what I want to do here is I want to change this. I want to make this return a message and also gonna return a body. So to do that, I'm going to change this JSON so that we can easily know when it's successful. So there's going to be a message saying, oh, success. And then there's going to be a body returning the user. Let me use a body here. There's a body here. It's going to return a user. And then there's also going to be a message that's going to be like successful. So you can know when a success or when it's not successful. So you see success. Okay. So you're going to have a success. You're going to have a body here. All right. So when you're gonna see that in the JSON, it's gonna be returned. It's gonna return a success. It's gonna return a body. So I just saved my work, and now I'm going back. I'm gonna go to my browser and trigger the login. So let's go to the browser. I'm gonna trigger the login. And you see there, you got a message that is not success, and you got a body. The body now contains the user that just logged in. So the login is working. The login is working perfectly now. So you see, now let's assume we use a wrong email. Let's assume we used the wrong email. Like for instance, we're going to change this email. We're going to make it invalid here. So this email currently does not exist in the database. And we're going to see the response we're getting from the Node API. We're going to get a response telling us user does not exist. Register now. So that means that we're using an email that does not exist in the database currently. So it's going to tell us there is no user, that we should register the user now. So the logic here is working perfectly. It's working nice. So now the next thing to do is now we have to do something different here. Before we used a default value, but now we want to get the user input because all this should be the input from the user. So to get the input from the user, we're going to use the request here. Yeah, that's what we're going to use. We're going to use that request and then we're going to get the user input. So whatever the user gives to us is what we're going to put inside this field here. So right here, we're going to say the request.body. Request.body. Then I'm going to say name. Then in here, we're going to say the request. Request.body. Then we're going to say email. Then in here, we're going to say the request.body. Then we're going to say password. Okay, so here we have the request, the body, the name, we have the email, and we have the password. So all this now we're going to get it from the user. So whatever the user gives to us is what we're going to insert inside here. So we are retrieving the user input using this request parameter here. So now we have the user input here. We are going to do the same thing for the login. So for the login, we're going to take in the user email. So we're going to say the request.body.email. So we're going to have the email here. So now we have the user input. Whatever the user gives to us is what we're gonna use. So now what we need to do next is to make sure we have everything in place. So if we go back to the sign up endpoint, what we have to do is we're going to try and surround this with a try catch. So the try catch here will enable us to catch any errors. So we're going to try, then we're going to catch error. So if there's an error, we're going to catch it and we're going to print it out to the console. So I'm going to say you're going to copy all of these. We're going to copy everything here. I'm going to put it inside the try. So we're going to copy it and put it inside the try. Then that's it. So now we're going to catch any error, you see. So we're going to catch any error. Yeah. So console.log. Then we're going to print out the error here. I'm going to say an error occurred. Then we're going to print out the error for the user. So this will be printed out on the console here. So remember to surround your logic with a try catch to catch any errors. So the next thing to do now, we're going to also say if the request.body.password is not equal to null. That means if there is if the password is not null, because in order to sign up you need a password. So we're going to copy everything here. We're going to put it inside the if statement. We're going to put it inside the if statement. So that means a password is necessary. If there is no password, we're going to tell the user a password is needed. So else, we're going to send a respond with the status of 404. Then we're going to tell the user, I'm going to send a JSON. So JSON will be like there's a message here telling you, there'll be a message here telling you password is required. So if there is no password, it's going to tell you a password is required here. Okay. Get rid of the semicolon. Okay, now that is it. If there's an error, if there is no password, it's going to tell you password is required. Okay, so that is it. Now, so the next thing to check is if there is an email here. So we're going to say the request.body.email. So if there is no email, we're going to do something about that. But now, if email is not equal to null, we're going to copy all of these and put this inside the if statement. That is, if email is not null, we're going to execute the logic here. But if the email is null, else, if it's null, we're going to send a response to the user. So else, I'm going to send a response to the user here. JSON. So we're going to send a response message here. Email is required. Alright, so now we have the way we have to check the email. We check the password. If there is no password, it's going to tell you password is required. If there is no email, it's going to tell you email is required. So now going over to the login. So in order for the login to be successful too, we have to surround it with a try catch. So inside your login, the endpoint here, you're going to surround it with a try catch. I think we should do that first. So first of all, let's check if the request.body.email, because in order to log in, we're going to log in with the email. So if the email is not equal to null, we're going to execute the logic. So if there is an email, we're going to execute the logic. So we're going to copy all of this and write it inside the if statement. We're going to write it inside the if statement here. Else, I'm going to print out, or we should send a response to the user. You can print it out to the console. But so I'm going to say email is required. But let's just print this, give a response to the user in a JSON format. So if there is no email, the message is going to be like, email is required. Okay. So that is it now. So now we need to also surround it with a try and catch. So we're going to catch any error. Then we're going to print the error out in the console. So I'm going to copy the whole of this. I'm going to copy the whole of this and I'm going to put it inside the try. So inside the try, I'm going to paste it here. So that is it. Let me arrange it. Let me make it look neat. I'm going to arrange it now. So that is it now. So it's much more better now. So now we're going to try and what's going to catch it. So if there's any error here, I'm going to print it out on the console here. So in the console, if there's an error, it's going to be like an error occurred. We're going to print it out. So in the console, the log, we're going to say if there is an error, I'm going to say an error occurred. So here we're going to print out the error. So this will help us identify the error. It will help us identify if there's an error. Going to tell us the error that occurred. And then to help us know how to correct it. So that is it for the login. Now we have checked the necessary requirements here. We've checked the email. We've surrounded with a try catch. We've also gotten the user, all of that. So we have to check the email is not equal to null. We're going to execute this if there's email. And then if there is no user, it's going to tell the user is not registered. Or else, if the user is not equal to null, we're going to return the user to the as a JSON format. So for the sign up, we see when we trigger the endpoint, we're going to check if there is password. If there is a password, we're also going to check if there is an email. If there is an email, we're also going to register the user. So if there's an email, we register the user and we save the user. So the user now is going to be returned to us in a JSON format. So we're going to have the user in a JSON format returned to us. Else, it's going to print out email is required if there is no email. And then it's going to print out password is required if there is no password. So everything is done here for the login and sign up here. So we have to test it now on Postman. Okay, so now going down, I want to try open my Postman because we're going to be communicating with the REST API using a client, something like a mobile app at the end of this tutorial. But for now, I'm going to use my Postman to test the REST API endpoint. So I'm going to open my Postman. You're going to see how to use Postman right now. We're going to test it with Postman. Then later on in the video, we're going to make use of a mobile app. We're going to make a mobile app with Flutter. And then we're going to communicate with this REST API endpoint using the Flutter mobile app. So my Postman now is open. So right here in the Postman, we're going to test the sign up. We're going to test the login. And we're going to see the result. We're going to see everything in the database. So showing me this, I'm going to go to my workplace, still showing me network. So I'm going to go to my home. So right now you're seeing a create new request collections or API in workspace. So that's what we're going to use. We're going to use that now to create an API. Let me go back. Remember, I'm not going to use any other one. We're not going to use any other thing. This is the one we're going to use, create new. So coming here now, we are seeing this. We're seeing a blank collections. We have a lot of options here. We have the get already a tab here that is open. We're going to create our own tab, a tab we're going to use. So we're going to use, I'm going to close this other tab. We're going to use this one. So these are other options here. You can go around, you can play around with your Postman and you can see what Postman does. You can just play around with yours. So for now, we're just going to use this. We're going to use we're going to put in a URL. We're going to test it here. So getting back to my VS Code, first of all, we're going to start with the API endpoint. We're going to start with login. We're going to start with sign up. So before that, we have to change the get. Remember to change your get to post. This is going to be a post request, So remember to change your get to post. We're going to do that for both login. We're going to do that for both sign up. So we're going to say post. It's going to be a post request here. Okay. So you now see a route is going to be a post request. So now we're going to send a post request to this endpoint with the necessary parameters here. This is login and all of that. So we're going to save our work. Remember to save your work. Change your get to post because we're going to be using a post request here to send information to the database. So coming back to my Postman, inside the Postman, I'm going to choose a post request here too. So in here, I'm going to use my local host. Let me go to my browser and I'm going to copy this URL. So I'm going to use this URL in my browser and come in here. I'm going to paste it in here. So in here, you now see we have our endpoint, login, and that's it. So time to test the endpoint. So now we're going to start with sign up. So let me copy the sign up here. I'm going to copy the sign up. I'm going to change this here because first of all we have to sign up a user, then we can log in. Okay, so we're going to start with sign up. The sign up, we need the name, we need the email, we need the password. So we need the name, we need the email, we need the password. So let's start up with that. Okay, so now what we're going to do, remember, it was talking about using Postman. This is everything we did previously. You saw how we wrote all of this, how we achieved it. So going to my index.js, there is something we need to add in here to enable us to read JSON and send JSON response to the user. So you need to add this to enable REST API connection, communication. You need to add this to your middleware function here in order for your REST API to communicate with the user. So we're going to say the express. We're going to say use URL encoded, then it's going to be extended to false. So URL encoded, extended is going to be false here. So this will help us communicate with the user, or this will help us communicate with the client, or send a JSON to return a JSON to the client each time we trigger the endpoint. So this will help us communicate with the client each time the endpoint is triggered. So remember to add this to your middleware function. So this will help us get JSON response for our API. So there's also something else we need to add. Apart from the URL encoded, we're going to say the REST API .use. I'm going to say the express.json. Express.json. Okay, going to be extended again to false. So you need to add these two things to enable the REST API communication. So now that is it. They use the URL encoded and the JSON. Okay, so that is it. So save your work. Always save your work when you're done making changes. So I just saved my work. Now going back to my API controller, you can see we have the endpoint sign up, which is going to be the first endpoint we're going to deal with here. So in order to deal with that, we have to, we're going to make use of the name, the email. I'm going to send the password. These are the three needed parameters here. So in my Postman, I'm going to input these values. So I'm going to put the name. So the name I'm going to use here would be Joseph. And what else are we going to use? We're going to use the email. So the email is going to be josephtest@gmail.com. And the password here is going to be Joseph Test. Okay, that's going to be the password, Joseph Test. So the name Joseph Test, email josephtest@gmail.com, and the password Joseph Test. Notice that this is a JSON here and it's in the body. It's in the body section of it. So now, and it's also notice that it's going to be a post request. So now I'm going to send the request. And when we send the request, you're seeing here what they're showing us. Could not send request. I'm seeing something like could not send request. So they could not send request. I don't know why it's coming up, but I'm going to open my terminal. And in my terminal, I'm going to run the npm again. I'm going to restart the node. So I'm going to say npm start. So the npm start is going to be like, okay, going to trigger the app to run again. Because I don't know, that should work now. Let me connect to my internet here. So right now I just triggered the npm start and it's running, but it's showing me an error here. So the error I see here is because we used a wrong format here for the URL encoded. So you go back to your index.js file, and in your index.js change this equal to symbol here to a semicolon. So this is the right way now. So kill the terminal, and I'm gonna say npm start. So now this should work. So in your index.js, please remember to also save your work. When you make changes, make sure you save your work. So that should work now. Alright, so now with this we can go back to the we can go back to the Postman and now test this. So I'm gonna send. Okay, you've seen, so the user now have been registered. So you can see the response here is a JSON that contains a user object with a status code of 200. So you see we have the name, we have the profile picture, we have all of these. So this is the user object here. So it has all of that, and you can go back to the database, the RestApi database, and the MongoDB. So when you go through the database, you see we have 4 users now, not 3. So this is the 4th user that just been registered here. You can see the user down here, the Joseph Test, that is the last user here. You can see that we have the user down here, so the user have been registered now. So now we have 4 users registered in the database. We can also decide that we want to log in, we want to test the login endpoint. For now, the sign up is working perfectly. So let me close this. So going back to my API controller here. So in here, this is the login endpoint. We're going to try to log in this user now. Let's try to log in the user that we just signed in. So I'm going to copy this email because I'm going to use the email to log in, because the email is required to log in. So I'm going to change this endpoint here to login. And to log in, all I need here, as you can check, all we need for the login is just the email. So I'm gonna get the email. So all we need is the email. We don't need the name to log in. We just need the email for login. So you see here, okay, let's try this now. So we have the email. I'm gonna try logging in, but this is taking so long right now. It's gonna be like there's an error here somewhere. So let me go back to my VS Code. So the error I see here is because let me check. The error here is because we have the email. Let me see. I don't know what's wrong. It's still saying sending request. Okay, so as you can see here, the problem should be because of this REST. We are using a response. Normally we should use a request. We should use a request to get the yeah. So change that to request there. Save all your work. Change that to request. Yeah, so I think that should work now. So we just change that to request. Change the RES. Change it to a request. And it's still taking time. Also save your work, you know. Okay, now to also make sure that your MongoDB gets connected, as you can see here, you have to make sure that your MongoDB gets connected to the data to the database before you actually run a request. You see, so now I'm gonna start the npm again. I'm gonna wait for my MongoDB to connect to the app before I make a RestApi request. So you see here, I'm waiting. It should indicate here. Okay, MongoDB have been connected. So now after the connection is when you can now make your request. So I think this should work, correct? Okay, now it works. Okay, so now we just logged in the user and it gives us the response. So that is it. So that is it for this tutorial. You can see everything works perfectly. We can log in, we can sign up a user. So now I think in the next video we're gonna work more on the password encryption, you understand, to encrypt the password in the next video. So we're gonna learn how to encrypt the password using the Bcrypt and library. So make sure you stay tuned for the next tutorial. Subscribe to the channel and see you guys in the next video.